Kia ora, Brian. Te Māori e, ko Wanganui te awa, o te wharewananga, o te upaka, o te ika a Maui, te marae, ko Paul Callaghan aho. Kia ora tātou. It's a real pleasure to be here today. As Brian has said, we don't think about the future terribly well in New Zealand, although some of us do. And I would say that Māori New Zealand is probably more focused on the future of generations to come than a lot of we Pākehā New Zealand. But this is really a question of the world we create for our mokopuna. This is really what this is about, and it's a very, very important matter. I want to say a little bit about New Zealand. You can see from the title up there, I'm kind of passionate about the knowledge economy and the role of science and technology in that. Part of what holds us back in New Zealand is our mythology. We have a lot of comfortable myths. One of our myths is that it's a great country to bring up children. It's a very egalitarian society. We used to believe that. If you look at the wonderful book by Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett, The Spirit Level, you'll see that so many negative social indicators, whether they be teenage pregnancy, child mortality, obesity, imprisonment rates, all correlate with a degree of income disparity. And you may be surprised to know that amongst the OECD countries, if you look at 33 of them, this is out of Time magazine, we are one of the worst in terms of income disparity. We rank along with the United States, Hong Kong, Singapore. We have a very big difference, and that's something that's happened over my lifetime. You can see that reflected in our prison population. We have one of the highest rates of imprisonment in these countries. Very, very poor performance there. There are some good aspects. We do very well on the level of democracy. We are not a corrupt country. And our kids at school score pretty well in maths and science internationally. So that's an interesting little fact. So we need a little bit of reality. And one of the things I'm going to do is perhaps say some harsh things about this country that I love in terms of some of our mythologies. Now, the other one, of course, is we're clean and green, aren't we? Now, in truth, our competitors abroad know that is not exactly true. And in fact, if you look at the international media around this, it's starting to be a bit of an embarrassment for us. We know, for example, that our dairy industry makes a huge impact on our rivers and lakes, and it's a problem for us in terms of scaling up this wonderful business. We have a capacity to enter into what I call egregious hypocrisy. We like to tell other people from some high moral ground how to run their lives. We tell Indonesians they shouldn't cut down their rainforests because that's a bad thing to plant palm oil trees. We climb aboard palm oil boats. We kind of forget that we New Zealanders turn 2/3 of our native forest into greenhouse gas, and we made farms. Were we wrong to do that? Had we not, we would have had no prosperity at all. But who are we to tell other countries not to use their natural resources? Of course, there is a moral position about palm oil. There's only one for a rich country like ours, and that is that we buy the forests at market value and we donate them back as national parks. That's the only moral position. But I don't think we can really stand on a high horse and tell the rest of the world how to run its environment. We are kind of soft about a lot of environmental issues. Our journalism is rather weak in this area. This is a lovely story. I'm going to entertain you with this story. It's about this boat here, which you will all know as the A.D. Gill. It went to the bottom of the ocean, the Southern Ocean, because it collided with a Japanese whaling boat. It was a source of great sentiment around many people in New Zealand. It used to be known as the Earth Race Eco Boat. It came to New Zealand once, and we had stories like this: every little drop helps the planet. What a wonderful thing this was, this eco boat. Well, it must be. It's called an eco boat. This is the sort of stuff we like to believe in New Zealand. Let me tell you, I'm a physicist, and the Earth Race Eco Boat is famous in the world of physics and engineering. And the reason is, you won't be able to read that graph. I'll just tell you what this is. This is speed of a vehicle, and that's how much fuel it uses per passenger kilometre. And down here are things like bicycles, which are very good. And even better are electric trains full of people, because they're just as efficient as bicycles, but they go a lot faster. Then we come to things like motor cars, 747s, ocean liners. And right at the top, you might care to guess what the worst vehicle ever created by humanity was. It was indeed the Earth Race Eco Boat. Isn't that an interesting story? What journalists have ever written about that? What a wonderful service the Nishan Maru did when it chopped the bar off and sent it down to Davy Jones' locker. So there we are. Now, of course, here's another myth we loved. You know, we don't need prosperity in New Zealand. We don't want to be rich like those Australians. We are rather obsessed about the richness of Australians. But look, I'm a metastatic cancer sufferer. I kind of like to have drugs. in Australia, you can get Avastin, a monoclonal antibody drug, very good for bowel cancer. We can't get it here. We can't afford it. These things are important to us. We want infrastructure that's decent, and we find it difficult to get that wherewithal together. And now we are faced with one of the greatest crises of a generation. The impact of Christchurch is extraordinary. The impact of that, just in terms of loss of life, the impact on our economy is more severe than the Sendai earthquake and tsunami on Japan's, and 8 times more severe than Hurricane Katrina's on the United States. We are going to be dealing with this issue for a decade. It is really serious, hence the appeal I've made. And I've had hot coals poured on my head, although surprisingly, many young New Zealanders abroad are supporting this idea. So, we do face this issue. The cost of the rebuild is extraordinary. At the very least, 15 billion. That's how it's broken up. Residential damage, 9 billion, et cetera, et cetera. Government's going to be up for 7 billion of that. That's you, the taxpayer. We are going to be paying for that out of our taxes. So this is really serious. Does prosperity matter to New Zealand? Of course it matters. It really does. And the interesting story of my lifetime is that when I was a child, more Australians migrated to New Zealand than vice versa. The New Zealand dollar was worth more than the Australian dollar. Australia was poorer per capita than we were. And it seems incredible to say that now, but look at what's happened. Australia is now richer than us, 35%. 35%. And that we have 500,000 New Zealanders living there. Should we worry about that? I believe we should. I think the government's right to have a goal to try to lift our prosperity, but they seem to have not the faintest idea how to do it. Now, here's another thing. Well, in New Zealand, at least we have a nice, easygoing lifestyle, don't we? We may not be as rich as the Aussies, but we have a good lifestyle. Maybe we need to work a bit harder, then we'd be richer. Well, you won't see New Zealand on this graph, but I'm going to show you in a moment. You might guess where it is. This is how hard the country works, how many hours you work per capita. So up there, harder work. Look at the Icelanders, they work really hard. Don't know what they do in Iceland, but they work very hard. Over here is how much you make for every hour you work. Look at the French. The French don't work at all, basically, but they are the most productive in the world. The United States, of course, is the most prosperous because you have to multiply this axis by that axis to get prosperity. But isn't it great to be French? Where's New Zealand? That's us. We are the second hardest working country in the OECD, but we are the lowest in terms of productivity. We are poor because we choose to be poor. I repeat that, we choose to be poor. Our education system is as good as any of those countries there, the French, the Swedes, the Danes, but we choose to work in low-wage activities. That's what we do in New Zealand. I'll come back to that point in a moment. Well, look, maybe we need more tourists. This would be great. Our Prime Minister believes that. He's Minister of Tourism. Tourism's great. If you walk across the Tongariro Crossing, you'll only meet 600 people on that. Perhaps we need to have a few thousand people doing the Tongariro Crossing every day. Instead of 10,000 visitors to Milford Sound every week, we could have, say, 40,000. That would be rather nice, wouldn't it? And that would make us rich. Let me tell you something very interesting about New Zealand. Our per capita GDP is about $40,000 a year. There are 1.3 million jobs in New Zealand, 1.3 million FTE. That means to maintain our current per capita GDP, we need $120,000 per job. What does tourism earn? About $80,000 a job. About 2/3 of what we need. More tourism, poorer you get. Tourism is great for employing unskilled people. It is absolutely not a route to prosperity. The wine industry, of which we're so proud, $90,000 a job. So why have we got any prosperity at all? Well, food manufacturing comes in pretty close to the average, but up at the top there is Fonterra. Without the dairy industry, New Zealand would be desperately poor. It's an astonishing thing. $350,000 a job in the dairy industry. Unfortunately, the workers don't get paid that much, but that's what it earns. Manufacturing is quite high. And there's some other companies up there that are rather interesting, like this one, Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. By the way, the area under those little bars represents the total impact on the economy. So Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, great, almost as good as dairy, but we need a few more of them. I'll come back to that point in a moment. But it's very illuminating. I find that metric quite an interesting one. What we think, $350,000 a job, that's good. I'm sorry. Apple Computer, $2 million a job. Samsung, $1.3 million a job. I mean, in the real world out there of highly productive business, we are not even looking at that. We haven't a clue what productivity really is. The French do, and they don't seem to work at all, which is great. Another little myth. Well, you can't manufacture in New Zealand, can you? Because the Chinese, they can manufacture so much better than we can. The biggest export earner for New Zealand is manufacturing. It is bigger than dairy, it is bigger than tourism, and most of it goes to Australia. And a very high proportion of it is what's known as elaborately transformed manufacture. That's fairly sophisticated stuff. You can manufacture in New Zealand no problem at all. You just need to make products with high profit margins and a high value per weight. And there are lots of companies that are doing that. And that's an interesting story. What will drive that is research and development, because what I'm talking about here is an economy where we're exporting knowledge. If we as a nation continue to think we can make a living by exploiting our resources, we are in serious trouble. We have to change the way we live in New Zealand. We have to change the way we employ our young people. We have to tell the stories about what is possible here, and the evidence is there that it is possible. And I'll come to that in a moment. But look at what we do as a country in terms of investment in research and development. We've been stuck at 0.5% of GDP government expenditure in research and development for a decade. It doesn't matter which government's in power, it never really changes. They make noises, they make cosmetic gestures, but nothing seriously changes. But this is what goes on in the real world out there. The United States spends an enormous amount of government money, quite apart from private money, in R&D. Our private investment in R&D, the grey part, is very low. It's not a problem that our industry is not far-sighted or anything. It's just that that's the nature of our economy. We're involved in the sort of businesses that don't do much R&D. I mean, you're selling milk powder, you don't need a lot of R&D around that. Pharmaceuticals, 90% of your return, 90% of your turnover goes into R&D. The food industry, 0.5%. That's the worldwide pattern. 90% R&D for the pharmaceutical industry worldwide, 0.5% for food. The knowledge economy is what drives prosperity. Now, the other thing is that when we do this in New Zealand, we get all enthusiastic. We have another little myth here, and you'll hear this myth from all sorts of people, particularly from people on the terrace, particularly from government agencies. The argument goes something like this: we're very small. Gotcha, so far that's pretty good. Therefore, we can't do everything. Yeah, okay. So we need to specialise. This is pretty scary. What should we specialise in? Well, we've got to play to our strengths, don't we? What are we good at? We're good at farming. Well, maybe we should try biotechnology. That was the game 10 years ago. So that's how much of a proportion of our science went into biotechnology, the purple there. United States, way less. Finland, way less. France, way less. But no, we went for biotech big time. And what did it result in? A great big zero. I'm sorry, it wasn't actually what we were good at. Whoa, we've got a new thing now. Maybe it's clean tech. Clean tech is what we need, isn't it? We're clean and green. We'll do clean tech. We'll focus on that. I have no idea why New Zealand would make better windmills than any other country in the world, but because we're clean and green, we should want to do that, shouldn't we? Or maybe it's smart foods. Maybe we should do smart foods. You see, these things sound wonderful to politicians. They really sound terrific, but they're just complete and utter nonsense. The truth is, what we're good at is really weird stuff. There's the 100 technology companies in New Zealand, scaled by order of size, and up the top there are people who make crystal-controlled oscillators for GPS on a chip. Sleep apnea devices and respiratory humidifiers. What the heck are those things? We are good at what we are good at. And we better be prepared to be good at some pretty weird stuff. And the two green companies there out of the 100 top technology companies are our only biotech companies. What we're good at is stuff you would not expect. And that's a very important thing for us to realise. Now, I'm a great fan of Chinese philosophy, and I love this man Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu says that all truth lies in paradox. All truth often derives from the very opposite of what you might think to be conventional wisdom. And this is something I challenge you with here today. I think children understand that. I mean, all children's literature, we know that the big giant is really a softy at heart. You know, we look at the Wizard of Oz, you know, the lion was a coward. Was he really? I mean, and you know, the powerful Wizard of Oz was just a silly old man behind the curtain. And all Dorothy had to do to go back to Kansas was to say, I want to go back to Kansas, and suddenly it became easy. So children understand paradox and irony. In fact, all of literature abounds with. I love this little irony from Jane Austen. It's a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Because the truth is that it's every girl that wants to get a guy is in possession of a good fortune. So, but it's a lovely way to say it. So, you know, we love irony. We live it, and the greatest of political leaders appreciate that. What civil war in the history of humanity has not ended with the torture, imprisonment, execution, and brutality towards the losing side? The American Civil War. Lay down your arms, go back to your farms. Officers, keep your sidearms. General Robert E. Lee, we honour you. Extraordinary. Abraham Lincoln, Do I not destroy my enemies when I make friends of them? If you look at the Gettysburg Address, there's a line in there. He says, few shall remember what we say here today. Extraordinary, isn't it? The ironies of that. Nelson Mandela gets out of prison. What does he say to the African National Congress? We must embrace the Afrikaner. Rugby is wonderful. Go the Springboks. That is the stuff of extraordinary political leadership. The paradox, the irony, the turning the conventional thinking on its head. And that's the power of the future, of thinking about the future. That's the challenge for all of us. Look at a few New Zealand paradoxes. Who are the two greatest scientists we've ever produced? Well, it should have been, I guess, an earth scientist and perhaps a plant scientist. It wasn't. It was a nuclear physicist. Why? I haven't the faintest idea. And a polymer chemist. Why? I haven't the faintest idea. We will be good at what we will be good at. Let's not presuppose it's going to be smart foods, clean tech, biotech, or any other trendy thing that a bureaucrat or politician tells you it should be because it sounds good. It just ain't true. And I've got another paradox here for the high-tech companies. You can look at them. If you go to a technology company in New Zealand and you ask them what they're doing, and your response is, hey, that sounds pretty cool, don't invest in that company. It's going to fail. If, on the other hand, you say, what the hell is that? That company might stand a chance. And the reason's very simple. New Zealand has an enormous advantage. We are 0.2% of the world's economy. There is a 500 times multiplier out there. We are not going to make flat screen television sets. We're not going to make computers. We're going to dominate little niches of the world economy that are small enough that the big players ignore them, but because of that 500 times multiplier are huge for us. You can rather run a $500 million a year export company on a niche market, just like Fisher & Paykel Healthcare does. They dominate the world market in respiratory humidifiers and sleep apnea devices. Now, so what's the story? Why can't we have more of those companies? They don't produce greenhouse gases. They don't require land. They don't use energy. They don't dump nitrates in our streams. They live in lovely buildings with lovely gardens around them with lots of people having a good life and enjoying themselves. And they're enormously beneficial for New Zealand. And the top 10 of them produce between them about $3 billion of exports a year. And what we're after is about 40 billion. So what we need is about 100 or maybe 120 companies, of which we've presently got 10. And if we can have 10, why not 100 or 120? Why not? Why? We just don't think that way. The kids in New Zealand growing up in schools and their parents don't realise that that is what is going on because these companies are invisible. They make weird stuff. They only sell abroad. They don't sponsor children's soccer or the ballet. They're invisible in New Zealand. I wish they weren't, but that's the story that has to be told. That's the future for us. And I think that's a really important one. So I do believe, and I've done something terrible here, I know I haven't, that 100 inspired entrepreneurs could turn this country around. It takes one genius entrepreneur to make a company like that, and it takes time to grow it. 100 individuals could earn us $40 billion a year in exports and get our prosperity up with no environmental downside. But then there's the question, why would such a business want to stay in New Zealand? Why wouldn't it move to San Diego or Shanghai? And there's one reason, and the picture says it all. Because the creative people working that business say, stuff it, no, I want to live in New Zealand. That's why Peter Jackson and Richard Taylor and Miramar Wellington, they could be in Burbank, California, because they're crazy, nutcase, passionate Kiwis who love it here. And therein is a crucial thing around the business plan for the future. Because if we don't understand the importance of environment and social justice and livable communities and good transport and a good education and good health system, we don't get it. Because fundamentally creative and talented people have a choice where they live in the world. And so the fundamental mission statement for us has got to be a country where talent wants to live. And that is about looking after our pristine environment as much as anything. And Rodney says, let's dig them up now. Christchurch has got a problem. We'll go to those national parks. There's 100 billion there. Well, actually, he's wrong. There's about 60 billion. I'm not interested in 60 billion one-off at the cost of all we hold dear. I want 40 billion a year, sustainably, for the future, in a way that doesn't damage all that's important to this country and why we love it and where we want to be. You see, if you don't have a business plan that's really realistic, you don't understand this stuff. But Jerry Brownlee talks about this. He doesn't get it. He doesn't get it because he doesn't see what sort of a country we're trying to create for our grandchildren, a place where talent wants to live. So that's the story. I won't go through as a list there. There's a kind of a list I made up of things we could do. I won't bore you with that because we've got a wonderful speaker coming up very, very soon from NASA, and I'm going to hand over to him. But I want to finish with just this challenge to you. And we see it in Christchurch today. We see it in what's happening in this room. We do not have visionary leadership on the centre left or centre right of this country. We need it in depth. And Lao Tzu says about leadership, the worst leaders we hate, the next best we fear, The next best, we honour and praise, but the best leaders are the ones we don't even notice they're there because we are getting on and doing it ourselves. That is the challenge for leadership. That's the challenge I put for you here. And I want to hand over now to Brian to introduce a wonderful speaker who's going to beam in by high tech from the United States. Thank you very much.